There are people that are making like millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. I think it's still the coolest thing that I've done in my career.
Do you think having your CPA makes a difference in your career?
I still tell students that.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. We'll start with just having you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you started with public accounting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, thank you so much, Sharon, for thinking of me and asking me to come on. I love doing things like this and just getting to speak about like being a CPA. So very honored to be asked to do so. But my name is Jessica Lewis. I am from Maryland, born and raised in Prince George's County, Maryland. I like to joke that I did all my schooling in Prince George's County because I went to the University of Maryland as well. I did dual degrees in accounting and finance, and I started my career at EY with Sharon. After spending a couple years at EY, I transitioned to an M&A tax role at Riveron Consulting, where I've been for coming up on 6 years now.
Pause before we continue. M&A stands for mergers and acquisitions. Okay, now back to the video. So tell me a little bit about, I know, yeah, we did tax together at EY, which was a great time. Tell me a little bit about your journey to tax and how you chose tax as a career path.
I don't really remember why I chose tax. When I started with EY, I did an externship after my freshman year of college. I really didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know about the different service lines. I didn't really know that there would be an option as to what I wanted to specialize in. Through that externship experience, which was just like a 2-day kind of, you got to go stay at a hotel overnight, which was super cool at the time. I just thought it was really exciting. You were told about all of the different service lines that EY had, and you were told that if you did get the opportunity to intern, you would have to choose. I didn't have any accounting or tax class experience at that time. I just hadn't gotten to that point in my academics yet. So I think I just really just picked. I just thought, okay, tax seems interesting. I thought it would be applicable to my real life. And I thought, oh, if I can do tax returns at work, I can do that at home and it will be helpful. So I just chose tax and just kept rolling with it.
Nice. And then, because the purpose really of this video for people watching is to show you the different career options with a CPA license, right? Jessica and I started in tax, but there's definitely more options to pursue as a CPA, and also within tax, right? There's still a diverse range of things that you can do. Like currently, I'm in a different practice than Jessica is currently working on. So maybe we'll go into next. Tell us a little bit about M&A tax. So you said you left from EY to Riveron and you've been there for 6 years and you're in M&A tax. So tell us a little bit about M&A tax and what that entails.
So yes, when I was at EY, I was doing pretty much entirely tax provisions, which is not something that I was familiar with before. And I thought that I would be doing tax returns. I got used to the provision work, and I thought when I went over to Riveron that I would also be doing tax provisions, but they had a need more in the M&A tax side. So M&A tax is essentially working and serving tax needs as it relates to transactions. And so when one company is going to acquire another company, or if a business owner is ready to sell their business, they want to make sure that they are aware of any potential tax risks and how those can be mitigated. So what we do usually in the context of, a company is buying another, they'll call us in and ask us to review all of the tax filings of the target company that they're acquiring, kind of all of their operations from like a nexus perspective, which essentially just means where they have people, where they have property, where they have sales. And we kind of compare their filings to where we think they should be filing and identify holes and potential risks. Mm-hmm. And then with that information, we go to that potential buyer and tell them, okay, well, here are ways that you can mitigate the risks by changing, the structure of the transaction, or by getting protection in the purchase agreement, contractually, or by getting like special transaction insurance that will help them cover any risks that come up after they've made the purchase.
That's very interesting. And I think it's cool to see how you could also use like your tax knowledge to like help companies with like their purchasing and helping them look through like what are the tax risks with this transaction and how can you mitigate the tax risk? Because as you can imagine, a lot of the companies that we work for are multi-million-dollar companies, and transactions in that scale typically go into the millions and billions, right? And so any risk of like any task risk could also be fairly large as well. So looking into that ahead of time and just providing advice to them can be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, it definitely is. And like you said, I think the tax background that I gained at EY was very helpful, because to be able to tell them what's wrong, you kind of just have to have a base knowledge of what the right answer is or what they should be doing. So it's still really important to kind of have that understanding of general tax compliance requirements. Where do people file? What should tax returns look like? What can they include? What can't they include? And that background really helps us to be able to kind of do that analysis of what the holes are. So a lot of our team has backgrounds in tax compliance or state and local tax. A lot of attorneys on our team, tax attorneys. Yeah, but the background was definitely very helpful and really important to be able to kind of
So
understand.
yeah, so you mentioned how the background was very helpful. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that background in more detail. Like what exactly were you doing when you were at EY? Like what is provisions? Like what did that
Yeah.
entail?
Yeah, so I had no idea what a provision was either. So essentially the tax provision is kind of acting like an auditor of the tax portion of the financial statement. So in essence, even though we were on the tax team, we were pretty much acting as auditors and working very closely with the audit teams, just looking at the specific tax line items. So again, through that experience, you got a lot of understanding of kind of how they prepare these work papers, how are they documenting, their deferred tax assets and liabilities, and kind of doing the work to support the numbers that they present to their investors. So again, that's very different than just doing a traditional tax return. I did also do some individual tax work. So I worked on like our private client services, which is like high net worth individuals that utilize the Big Four to do their taxes. So that gave me some experience like actually preparing tax returns, but most of my time was spent doing the provisions because there are, quarter and annual reporting requirements for these large companies.
Yeah. That makes sense. So now let's talk about the type of clients that you typically work with. And I know when you and I worked at EY together, we typically would have like our client list, and those are the clients we work on recurrently. From an M&A tax perspective, what does that look like? Do you have the same clients that are just going on multiple transactions? Are your clients different? What's the industry like?
Yeah, so usually my clients are private equity clients. So private equity firms are, an investment company. All they do is buy and sell other companies. Their goal is purchase a smaller company, help them with their growth over a set time period, usually like 5 years or so is a standard period of return, and then they'll sell the company hopefully for a profit. And so because of that, obviously they're very acquisitive. They do way more acquisitions than a typical company would do. And so they have a lot of diligence needs. So most of my clients are private equity clients. They kind of typically the way it works is they'll start with a platform in a specific industry, and then they will do add-ons after that. So the platform might be in manufacturing. They'll buy, for example, a parts manufacturer. They may manufacture brakes on cars, and that's all they do. It can be as niche as that. And then they'll go and acquire a lot of different companies regionally, globally, nationally that kind of do the same thing to help with that growth. And because they have, typically a short investment period, a lot of the growth is through acquisitions, right? I mean, you can grow your business, but if there are economic factors or whatever it might be that are just kind of slowing the economy, it's going to be harder to grow without doing those acquisitions and kind of building that way. So that's kind of how most of my clients work. And I think that's pretty standard just because a lot of other companies that are smaller or middle market that we play, they're probably not doing as many acquisitions. They may do a one-off buy here and combine, but definitely private equity is where we get the majority of our work.
Yeah, that would make sense because a lot of the private equity companies are doing investments and
Yes.
acquiring companies and infusing capital. So
Yep.
that
And
makes
then,
sense.
like I mentioned, we also do sell side work, which is essentially when they're ready to sell, they also want to make sure that they're prepared and aware of any deficits that they might have in their processes. So they'll call us on the sell side as well to help them in preparation for a potential sale.
Well, that's pretty nice. I didn't quite realize that you could also work on the buy side and the sell side as well. Because
Yeah.
it's almost like telling the client, hey, these are the things that you should prevent so that way you have a good deal for the buyer
Yep,
who you're selling to.
exactly. Yeah. And the sell side is important because a lot of times, especially if you're like, a family owned or a founder owned business in the middle market, you may not be very familiar with what a diligence process is going to look like. It's a lot of requests. There are usually, in addition to tax, there are usually multiple work streams happening at the same time. So there are people doing diligence on your financial statements, on your legal operations, on your HR, on, your operations, your technology. There could be up to 6 or more work streams of diligence happening at one time, and you're getting all these requests and it's very overwhelming. So having someone come in early on and help you prepare for that and can be really helpful just so they can continue to run their business. And also so you're aware of risks that could later on down the line be negotiation points that, a buyer may want to cut your purchase price because of these things. If you can kind of get ahead of it, it just helps you get more value.
So maybe let's walk through what a day in the life like me it would be like for you. Day in the life for, say you're working on a transaction on the buy side, like a company they've come to you and say, we want to buy X company. We would like to engage you to do a buy side diligence. Like walk me through how that transaction would go, what a day in the life would look like for you.
Yeah, so typically we're working on multiple deals at a time. So that's something to keep in mind, right? These deals are usually pretty fast moving. When we scope them, we intend for them to be 2 to 4 weeks from start to finish of our work. Usually they drag a little bit longer just because that's how things go, but that's kind of the ideal timeline. But it starts off with us going in and preparing kind of an initial request list. Pretty standard across all of deals. We'll try to understand, the tax structure of the target, which is the company that's being acquired. If they're an S corporation, there might be specific requests specific to that versus a C corporation, a partnership, et cetera. So we'll start by sending that request list, and then they'll usually set up some type of data room, which is where they upload all the documents. It's a lot of document review up front, so we can really get a good understanding of what this business does, where they're currently filing. We'll look at all the tax returns that they file. And this is not just, federal and state tax returns. There's also sales and use tax, property tax, payroll taxes. There's unclaimed property reports. And there could be, other provisions like recently with the CARES Act and PPP loans and employee retention credits. Those are things that we look into as well. So a lot of documents, look through all of that. And then typically in a day, I'm having a couple different internal meetings to talk about the review that the team has done of the data we received, and also to prepare an agenda for a call. So after we look through all of the information, we prepare an agenda that we share with the target, and we have either 1 or 2 tax diligence calls where we probably spend an hour and a half or so on a call with them, just asking, questions about everything that they do, how they manage their compliance, why they file where they file, why they don't file other places. And we typically talk with their tax preparer as well. So if they're using a firm, Big Four or whatever it might be, we talk with them. After that, we will typically have to send more requests back and forth, follow-ups, and then we'll start the process of drafting our report. And then along with the report, simultaneously, we're calculating any exposures. And that is, again, if there are deficits, tax that they should have paid that they didn't, we are kind of focus on getting a number to our client of what that risk could be. So in a day, I'm usually reviewing data room. I'm reviewing those exposure calculations to make sure that I agree with the numbers that the team has put together, or I'm reviewing the report to get that, through all the levels of review within our organization and then deliver to the client. After we deliver, there is going to be a series of debriefs. We usually talk with our client, who is the buyer, about the risk. We usually talk with their legal team about the risks because the attorneys are very involved in crafting the purchase agreement. And that's where they're going to kind of make sure that we're covered for all these risks. So we have to be on the same page about what we found. And then we'll review the purchase agreements as well. So make sure that, they're covered on any issues. There's no surprises. Like they will have contractual remedy if things go wrong. And then after that, we also are regularly helping with reps and warranties insurance calls. So reps and warranties insurance is essentially an insurance plan that covers the items that are in the purchase agreement. So our buyers will go and get insurance to make sure that if the client said or the target said something is true and it turns out not to be true, that they have coverage to get back any money that they might be lose. So we help with those calls and kind of setting up the plans and answering any questions they may have. So I know that that's kind of an overview of the process, but I say that to say these things are moving very quickly. So since I'm working on multiple deals, I'm in multiple phases of that process in any given day.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how often are you, because I heard you say you have calls with the company that is being acquired, right? You have calls to ask them questions about what's going on with their tax filing, their tax footprint. How often are you also having calls with, say, the client to debrief them on like, this is what we're finding before the actual report goes out?
Yeah, so we usually update the client at least weekly. Some clients are a little bit more hands-on and they want kind of like, we'll have 2 touch point calls a week. At minimum, we try to give them weekly updates either over the phone or in an email so that they are able to just know where we are in the process and keep them privy to any exposures early on.
Okay, so I will move on now to like the challenges and growth part of your career. I know you've done Big Four, right? And now you're at Riveron and you're doing M&A tax, which is different than what you did at EY. What would you say right now is the most challenging part about your job?
Yeah. I think the most challenging part is kind of what I think a lot of people in client service would say, and it's dealing with the clients, the deadlines and demands of being in client service, right? I think I've never worked in-house anywhere, so I can't really speak to that, but I know working in client service just comes with the challenge of, every client feels that their project is the most important project. They want you to, be super responsive, be on top of it. And that's our responsibility as service providers. And so it's just, there's a demand to that comes with, making sure that you're getting back to their questions on time, making sure that they're happy. If they do have issues, how can we address those in a timely manner? So I think it's just making sure that your clients are happy, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are bringing the work, and they're the ones that kind of keep this ship afloat. So just juggling multiple clients, their expectations, and the timelines it can be the most challenging part.
And how do you do it? How do you manage? Because I know like you have life outside work, and I feel like you do a good job of like being present at work, doing a good job at work, and also having a life outside work. Because I know one of the misconceptions, or I guess what people struggle with the most about the idea of working in public accounting, is just the concept of work-life balance, balancing like life and balancing work. So how do you do it? How do you manage your clients and also manage the outside or non-client responsibilities?
I think it's constantly changing. I think when I was like very new in my career, it was easy to throw all my time into work and not have much balance. And I thought it was okay. And I was like, oh, this is easy. But as you get further in your career and you have more commitments in your life and family and things that, you want to be spending time on, you kind of get to understand that, there are going to be times in your life where work is busy and it's going to take a little bit more, and you have to lean into that. And then there's going to be times where there are things in your life that take precedent and are more important. And, it's hard to say balance. I like to say like integration. Like I try to fit them both in and just feel like, if I know that I have something that, my husband and I have planned something this evening and I can't work late, then I'll communicate that to the members of my team and say, hey, I have a hard stop at this time. Here's what I'm going to do earlier in the week or early in the day to get ahead. And then if I need to, do a little bit extra tomorrow or do a little bit extra the day before, then I understand that that's what I have to do. But I think it's just being overly communicative with everyone in your life of I am, trying to give both of these things my best self. And that looks different at different times, but just trying to talk, trying to make sure that people understand and picking up extra where I can in both places just to make sure that both are fed. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard to know the perfect right things to do. I think everybody's just trying to kind of juggle and figure it out. And just giving yourself grace is really important. I definitely go through times where I feel like I'm not as present in one area or the other, and I can be hard on myself about that. But I think that's just the natural flow of life. And I think when you learn to just give yourself grace and do the best that you can and put your best foot forward in all aspects of your life, then it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah, it definitely does. I guess the key takeaway here, I would say it's definitely doable to learn how over time, learn how to better manage your work life, integrate your work life with your personal life, and just making sure that you're present in the best way that you can be in both areas and thrive in both areas. Because I think the best people who work well, the best are people who are able to still have a life outside of their work and not be frustrated with working all the time and not getting to do things that they like to do outside work. So it's practice over time, and then you get better at it.
Yeah. You will burn out very quickly if you're just trying to throw everything to work and not taking time for yourself and other things. It's really important to try to spread, your time and energy to things that you love and enjoy and like to do outside of work, and then also to your work, because, a lot of people that go into accounting fields are driven and they want to be successful and they want to have success in their careers as well. So you figure it out.
Okay, so what misconceptions do you think people have about tax in general, or about maybe say M&A tax?
Yeah, I think tax in general is that it's just doing tax returns. When I say I'm in tax, everybody assumes like, oh, hey, can you do my taxes? Like I barely do my own taxes. Like I use TurboTax to do my taxes.
Yeah, me too.
I think that's the biggest misconception. Is like, if I go into tax, it's going to be boring. I'm just going to sit and do tax returns every day. No, there are so many different careers in tax alone. Like, people make careers out of one section of the tax code. There are people that only do partnerships. There are people that only do, tax attributes or, there's so many different things within tax that you can do, and you can make a whole career and never touch a tax return at all. So I think it's a lot more dynamic than people think. It's a lot more interesting than I think a lot of people think. There's a lot that you can do, and you can really tailor your career to be full of things that you find interesting.
Yeah.
So I think just, look into it a little bit more than just, and even in school, I think in my class, it was a lot of just like, here's how you do this type of return, which is, again, just not really what my career has looked like. So it's a lot more than just doing tax return.
I completely agree. And like you said, it's a lot more dynamic and interesting than you think. I know a lot
Yeah.
of people typically ask me, because I've been in public accounting now almost 12 years, like, why have you stayed so long? And the short answer is actually, I like the work. I enjoy the work. It's mentally stimulating, and I like to do the work that I like to do. And I like the people that I work with. And it's as simple as that. Like, when you enjoy the work, it almost sometimes doesn't feel like work. It seems like learning and just growing with your career.
And especially in M&A, it's like every deal is so different. Like, we are dealing with so many different industries, so many different types of companies, so many sizes of companies. I find it really interesting even to just see the kind of business that people do, how entrepreneurs have grown their business. Like, there's so many small niche things that people do and find success in. And I find that really interesting. So being able to kind of have access to so many different types of business owners, I find that really interesting. And every deal is different. You're always learning something new. And I like that aspect too, of just feeling like I'm doing the same thing generally, but the specifics of it can be different every day.
And I can imagine that could give you like a sense of purpose, right? With like helping entrepreneurs like grow their business, sell their businesses, and be successful. Because a lot of people go into business to be successful. And now
Yes.
being in the shoes where you're helping those businesses sell in a way that is profitable to them and just help them with their business. I can imagine that's something that you find very, very purposeful, I would say.
I agree. Yeah, definitely being on the sell side and like helping business owners prepare for that next step. I really do enjoy that because, again, like I said, a lot of them are not used to being in this kind of process. They're dealing with, private equity, which are like huge organizations. And so really just making sure that they understand their value and like how much they can really get out of the transaction it's really rewarding, and they are very, very appreciative of it.
I can imagine. Because I've been on those calls with on just like as the tax advisors of companies who are being bought, like being on the calls to explain like how we file your tax returns. And the request is a lot. Like
It's
it's
a
a
lot.
lot of like documents. So imagine just having someone helping you, coach you through that process. I can imagine like it's something that they definitely appreciate for sure.
For sure. And like having an advisor to say, here's what to say, like here's what you don't say, like don't overshare. When you get nervous, people have the tendency to just kind of keep talking, and that can, in this context can be a detriment to them. So we always just like to support them and help them know how to put their best foot forward in these conversations.
How do you keep growing in your career? Like, because I can imagine, because when I look back with my career, when I graduated from college and when I started working, I feel like I'm like a totally different person. And to think
Yeah.
that you left college feeling like, oh, I have all this knowledge, so there's still a lot more knowledge to be gained, like in the workforce. So with you, how have you been growing with your career, and like what helps you keep growing?
Yeah. I think, again, it was different when I was at EY at a bigger organization. They had, a lot of trainings and a lot of just all the resources in the world, right? The biggest accounting firms, they have like such a breadth of resources. Now being at Rivron, a little bit of a smaller organization, we have great resources internally, but a lot of the requirements that I go through, even just to maintain my CPA and the CPE that I have to do, I find that on my own. And so I think it's, first of all, doing CPE. I think just going out and looking for CPE that's actually relevant to me. Sometimes it's easy to just like, find a free CPE site and just kind of check the box. But I think I really use that requirement to help me like keep learning because, again, it's on me to go find that. And then also just not being complacent. Like when I do see things in deals and in work that is new to me, I try to actually do research on the topic. I try to like dig deep into it and learn about it, because that on the job learning is where you get the majority of your information, like doing the deals, being in the details. And as you move up in your career to more like where you're, reviewing things as opposed to preparing things, you kind of get less of that. So I still challenge myself to do the research and look into the issues and make sure that I am actually like challenging myself to learn and understand things deeply as I see them in the course of my work, because I think that's just the easiest way to kind of make sure that I'm actually learning new things and getting new information. And then last is like using my network and being involved in like professional organizations. A lot of times in the week, I'll go to events that they have on like specific topics and things that are going on in the market. Like there's a new tax bill, or a portion of the bill relates to the tax code. So that's something big that's our clients have been asking us about. So going to events where they're talking about that or talking to people in my network about that is helpful to stay up to date on market trends and like how the tax world is changing.
That's cool.
But again, I try to integrate it into my work day so that it's a little bit easier. It doesn't feel like an extra task that I have to do, like, oh, well, I just did my whole day of work and now I have to go and like read a tax book. Like that can be interesting sometimes, but like I like to try to mix it into my day and make it relevant to the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of the professional firms, like you mentioned, the Big Fours and the firms like Riveron, like there are opportunities for you to keep learning and keep growing just by the mere nature of just serving your clients, right? You see a bunch of different things and you get a lot of coaching from the people you work with, and you just keep growing in your career. So I completely agree with that. So let's move on to the section of practical advice for students who might be interested in a career in tax or interested in a career in M&A tax. Like, what advice would you give that person?
Yeah. So I think that starting in a bigger firm and moving down, if you have the opportunity to do so, is always, a great opportunity. Like I said, I compare working in, a big four firm or like a big regional firm of that nature to kind of like going to an Ivy League school, right? Like you can definitely be successful and not go to an Ivy League school. However, going to those organizations, you have, the best professors, the best resources, and it really just kind of gives you a solid baseline for the rest of your career. So if that is something that you are interested, if you even have an inkling of, hey, I think I might want to do public accounting, I would definitely recommend trying to at least start your career in a bigger firm, and you may love it and decide to stay your whole career, or you may decide it's not for you and move on. But I think having that base of knowledge is really helpful. For tax in particular, kind of same concept. I think having a strong base in like compliance and provisions and doing those early on in your career and getting exposure is really helpful and will open up a lot of opportunities for you if you do decide you want to go to a different organization or go in-house or whatever it might be. So I always just say kind of start with the bigger picture if you can, and if you're not sure, and then from there you can kind of figure out, okay, you're going to get access and exposure to so many different things being in these bigger firms. It will give you a lot of insight into what you like and what you don't like, and you can tailor your career from there.
That makes sense, for sure.
And even if you do decide to start in a smaller organization, or you feel like I don't want to be, in one of these huge conglomerates, I want to start small, definitely, again, challenge yourself to get on different types of projects. What are other people on your team doing? What have your bosses done in their career? What knowledge can you get from them? I think it's just looking around and kind of seeing who's around me. How can I be eager to just learn and understand what my options are? Because starting out, I did not feel like I had a good grasp on all the different things that I could do with my career, just because, there's so many. It's really hard to know that as a student. You get taught this in school and you feel like that's what your work is going to be. So just try to learn from the people that you're around and get a feel for everything you like and don't like, and don't be afraid to pivot and let that change as you move on in your career.
Thank you for those tips. And if students were to be working on their skills, right? What skills would you say they should work on now before they get into the workforce, or they get into, like, say, public accounting or tax?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that you need to focus strongly on technical skills, like, very tax specific, tax code language, how to do a tax return. I think doing the little things right, the soft skills, are extremely important. Knowing how to write an email, knowing, how to have a conversation in an interview, doing your research ahead of interviews, remembering what you talked to somebody about and sending a follow-up note, making eye contact. Like, you would be surprised how much of a difference those things can make and how much that could even help you stand out. I think, you know, especially a lot of students that maybe have been remote or, you know, are going through college in the COVID time and they didn't really have as much experience going into an office and like working in a professional setting, challenging yourself to kind of ask, again, use your resources, ask people around you, ask friends, ask the people, you know, your more senior people on your team about what their expectations are and align to that. And just like the professionalism aspect is very important. And that I think is the baseline going in. You'll learn all the technical things you need to learn on the job, but
Yeah.
those things you can start practicing in college and will really help as you
Yeah,
start.
I completely agree. The soft skills I think are very, very important because we're in the people business, right? We're working with people every day in the firm and outside with your clients, right? So just how you interface, how you show up, how you speak to them, it makes a whole lot of difference for
Yeah,
sure.
public speaking for sure. That's very important. Get speaking experience in college. Be in a club. If you can be on a leadership board, those things will help you a lot.
Wrap up this section on practical advice with one last question. Now you have your CPA. I believe you studied for the exam and passed it before you started working, right?
Yeah.
Maybe share a little bit about that. And then, do you think having your CPA makes a difference in your career? Is it a necessity, or do you think it doesn't make a difference at all?
Yeah. So for my CPA, I did my 150, and I know the requirements are changing a little bit, but I did the 150 credits that I was required to get in undergrad because I just didn't want to pay for an extra year, just to be honest. Like, I really wanted to fit it in. So I took extra credits and I took one winter semester and one summer semester to get that done when I graduated. And then when I received my offer at EY, I got the option to start in, I believe, August or so, maybe July or August after I graduated, or start in January. And so I chose to start in January so that I could take the time between my graduation in May and January to focus on the CPA. At the time that I made that decision, I was very, nervous about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not working. Like, I thought, I just felt very emotional about that decision, which now looking back, I think it was the best thing that I could have possibly done. And I'm so happy that I did that because, again, I treated my studying like a full-time job from May to January. I took an in-person class for my first CPA exam with Becker. I used Becker. That's what EY provided us with. And then the other ones I self-studied, and I was able to take and pass all those exams in that time. And I think it's truly because I was focused on that. Like, that was my number one priority. And so I really gave it the time and energy that it deserved because I didn't also have work competing for that. So I think if you have the opportunity to do that, I know that's a privilege. Some people like need to start working right away or, whatever your circumstances might be. But if you do have the opportunity to do that, 6 months in the grand scheme of your career is nothing. Like, having that CPA done was a huge relief. And, in my career now, I don't use my CPA. I don't have to be a CPA to be in the role that I'm in. But I think that the CPA is extremely valuable. I still tell students that, just having that certification and showing that, you took the time to study and pass these difficult exams, I think that it's worth it. And especially if you're in an organization that is funding that, like a Big Four or, a lot of regional firms will do that as well, it's worth it. And I think that, as time passes, less and less people are taking the CPA, sadly. And I know there are a lot of barriers to entry to be able to afford the preparation classes if you're not working with the Big Four and things like that. I think that if you do have the opportunity and it's something that you're interested in having a long-term career in accounting, it's a distinction that will never lose its value. And it's something that I think is important.
Yeah, and like you had mentioned earlier as well, because you have your CPA, you also have to keep up with the learning, like
Yeah.
continued learning. So it helps you also stay up to date with like your learning and just keep growing with your career for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think being an M&A, like, I know a lot of people now where I am in my career, a lot of friends are going back and getting like their MBAs and different things like that. And I don't think that necessarily aligns with my career path of being an But I think having that CPA certification makes me feel like, okay, I have like some kind of certification to help push me through my career. It just adds a little bit of credibility. That's what the point of a certification, right? So I think it's still helpful, even though I'm not required to have it for the role that I'm currently in.
So we're going to wrap up now with just some fun questions to get to know Jessica a little bit and know how you can
Perfect.
connect with her later. So maybe share a little bit about what you love the most about what you do.
Yeah. I think it's what I mentioned earlier of just like seeing what people do. Like I find it so interesting how, someone can build a whole very lucrative business around making, the hinge that goes on the door of an airplane, or just the most random kind of small things that we don't even think about that we interact with. There are people that are making like millions and millions, if not billions of dollars just on making that one thing. So maybe it's like the nosy side of me or just just being curious, but I find it really interesting of just what people do, how they do it, how they got to success. And I like talking to business owners a lot. So I think that's my favorite part.
Can you think about one fun or memorable time that you've had in your career? And can
Yeah.
you share?
I think still the coolest thing that I've done in my career was actually with EY when I got to do their international internship program. So I got to intern in Australia. I did half of my internship in Australia and then half at the office in Tyson. So that was a really, really cool experience. Just being able to work abroad, explore abroad, that going to Australia was an amazing opportunity. So I think that I'm not sure if they still do that program, but if they do, there are so many different opportunities that these bigger firms offer to like send students abroad or just, work in different places. So I would look into that and see if that's something that you're interested in. But I still talk about that to this day as one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do in my career. Thanks
Yeah,
to you all.
yeah. So and I'm glad to hear that. And technically, Jessica is an EY alum, so I'm so glad that we got a chance to connect. And I'm so glad that you still think of your EY time very fondly.
I
And
do.
I'm glad that we had the time to just sit down and chat about your current career and how you're doing. And I'm so glad to see that you're doing well with your career. Thank you so much for connecting with me. And if people wanted to connect with you, where can they find you to
Yeah, you
connect with
can
you?
find me on LinkedIn. If you search Jessica Lewis Riveron, Riveron, it should come up. And I'm sure Sharon, I can share the link with you to put in the bio and everything like that of my contact on LinkedIn. But feel free to send me a message, connect. I'm always happy to answer questions and talk to students or prospective CPA or anybody in their career that wants to connect.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's great talking to you. And you were definitely one of my first mentors and someone that I really do look up to. So I appreciate you reaching out to have this interview.
Thank you.